Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to another Fallout 4 modding video. Today, we're checking out a brand new weapon pack by myself and the Commonwealth Weaponry team. Although this time it's mostly just me and Pig again. We are going to be checking out a brand new makeshift sort of melee pack, which you may recognize as a familiar thing. Funny enough, I don't know if I ever made a video on my first makeshift melee pack, but that mod is doing very, very well, and people seem to enjoy it a lot. And now there is a new one themed specifically around garage items. Tools and things that you would think would be the first go-to weapon in a game like Fallout. It seems to be a trend in zombie games to pick up a wrench or a hammer and use that to clobber your enemies in this post-apocalyptic environment. But in Fallout, that is something we just don't really see. There's a tire iron and a pipe wrench. And I think that's about it, at least in Fallout 4. We wanted to change that, and we've been wanting to change that for a very long time. We've actually had this idea forever, and I finally decided to jump on it because it sounded really, really fun, and I feel like I had a few good ideas for it. So, in this pack, you're going to be receiving a claw hammer, which is a wonderful post-apocalyptic blunt melee weapon, a screwdriver shiv, which is going to be a Phillips head screwdriver that you can do other things too, and a gigantic two-handed heavy wrench, similar to stuff that you could see in, like, Dead Island. A very, very large wrench for working on big cars or tractors or who knows what else. And all of these are heavily modifiable over at the weapons workbench. There's a ton of things you can do to these weapons to make them really cool, makeshifty, and very inventive for the original weapons that they were. All of these, by the way, are added to the level list, so you will be able to find them out in the world. And you can also get them in random configurations. So when you run into a raider, he may have a regular hammer, or he may have one that is kitted to the nines with all kinds of crazy customization options that make it into a new makeshifty sort of weapon made out of a hammer, which I think is very, very fun. We're trying to get a little bit more makeshifty, a little bit more scrappy lately, and that's going to show in future mods as well, but for now, we really wanted to test it out on some cool melee options. Once we head in-game, I do want to talk about the stats of each of these individually and talk a little bit about my design process and some ideas that I had for them. But first, let's talk about some overall important points with this mod. You're getting 3 main weapons that, again, are all heavily customizable. Each of them has their own level-less integration. The hammer and screwdriver are injected to raiders and can be found after level 3. You can also purchase those from vendors and even find them in toolboxes and anywhere else that you might find tool loot. So if you would open a container and find things like screwdrivers and wrenches, you may also now find the new weapon variants. And just to make sure that people don't get confused, all of these are a little bit different than their miscellaneous item components because, crazy enough, hammers, screwdrivers, and wrenches are all miscellaneous items in the game already with lower quality missions. Ours are going to be made completely from scratch, higher quality since you're going to be looking at it in your hand, and it's going to be named a bit differently. So, the screwdriver is a miscellaneous item in the vanilla game. It is a flat head with a red handle. Ours is a Phillips head with a blue handle, and it is called the screwdriver shiv, so you don't get confused. The wrench, again, is a miscellaneous item. Ours is much larger, and it is called the heavy wrench, once again, so you don't get confused, and it is named differently from the pipe wrench in the vanilla game. And then the claw hammer, Pig swears that there is a claw hammer miscellaneous item. I feel like I've never seen that personally. I know that there is a claw hammer asset found on like different set pieces and armors, but I don't think I've ever run into the claw hammer as a miscellaneous item, but I have run into the ball peen hammer a lot. But just to be safe and make sure that there is no confusion, we have a claw hammer that is a weapon. If you run into 2, whoops, and I'm sorry. Now, like I said, the hammer and screwdriver can be found in all those places, including the cool tool loot thing after level 3, and the heavy wrench can be found in those same places on raiders and in tool loots and purchasable from vendors, but that'll happen after level 6. On top of that, there is one unique melee weapon included in this mod that we'll talk about a little bit more later. Aside from that, since it is a melee mod, there's not a whole lot going on for the custom animation side of things, but I will be talking about the animations they do use when we get to each individual weapon breakdown. Matter of fact, I'm going to let the preamble be a bit shorter this time because we've got a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and jump in game and start discussing each of these weapons individually. For starters, let's talk about what I would consider the most iconic piece in this pack, the claw hammer. Again, all of these have their own custom assets. We won't be reusing any of the vanilla miscellaneous items for these weapons. That way they're nice and high quality in first person. Now, this is probably one of the most boring preview menu items because everybody and their mother has seen a hammer before, but I promise the customization options for these weapons makes them really cool and interesting, but as usual, when it comes to the stat breakdown, I want to talk about these in their most basic format. This thing is going to have a base damage of... I don't think 23 is correct because I probably have perks on, so I'm not going to have the most accurate information on that. Let's check really quick. I'll do the math live. I have a melee skill of 12. Oh, no. So that's actually pretty close. So this thing probably has a base damage of about 20, a swing speed of medium, a weight of 2 pounds, and a value of 26 caps. And it has 2 mod slots that you can customize. Once again, this thing can be found after level 3, and it can be found with different random attachments on raiders, which is really, really fun. Let's actually go ahead and check out some of the attachments for the claw hammer so you can see what wacky customization options this thing has. So the first category for the claw hammer is going to be the head section, where you have your standard head. You also have the spiked head, which has a bunch of tack welded nails on the hammer, which I thought was a funny juxtaposition. Normally you hammer the nails into things. Well, you're still going to be doing that just a little bit differently. And this is going to add some armor piercing damage as this pokes holes through your enemy's armor. We also have a heavy head, which has a bunch of gears welded onto this thing, and it is going to add extra limb damage and superior damage overall. We have the puncturing head, which adds armor piercing, which is going to have 2 screwdrivers clamped onto the sides. The bladed head has a makeshift axe that is clamped on and bolted onto this thing as tightly as can be, in hopes that it doesn't wiggle around too much, but it probably still will. And that's going to make a sort of makeshift axe out of a hammer that comes with the claw in the back. I think that that looks super, super cool. We also have an electrified head. This is an animated electrification, but it just looks like this in the menu here. When you actually take it out, that will be blinking and flickering. And then we also have a heated head, which has a similar story and is nice and hot at the tip here and kind of fades into normal metal at the back. And I think that that one also looks really, really cool. Additionally, there is a grip section where you have your standard wooden grip. We have a comfort grip with a leather wrap and a heavy grip, which is a little bit more makeshift. You got electrical tape as well as a fridge door handle that is bolted onto the top and bottom as a sort of knuckle guard. And if you combine this with your favorite head, you end up with a whole new weapon that looks really, really cool and makeshifty, with a claw hammer that's still built in there at the bottom somewhere. Now, the next weapon we're talking about is pretty interesting. We have the screwdriver shiv, and in its most basic configuration, it's basically just a Phillips head screwdriver with a blue handle, but it has a nice damage of 17, has a swing speed of fast, a weight of 1, and a value of 20. Essentially a miscellaneous item that bites back, but just like the hammer, this thing actually does come with a good bit of modifications. It's pretty hard to make ideas for a screwdriver, but we did our best, and I think we came up with some pretty good options. Here at the workbench, there is only one category for the shiv. We had talked about maybe doing color options for the handle, but I thought that was just a little redundant, and having the blue gives you nice contrast from the regular red flathead in the game. Now, the standard no upgrade is just a Phillips head, which I thought was better for poking things than a flathead, but you can also get a sharpened upgrade. The implication that you filed down the head of this thing into almost an ice pick shape, so it's very, very sharp and perfect for poking things. This is going to give you improved damage, but there's more than that. We also have a serrated upgrade, which takes that sharpened version and adds an extra blade to this thing that is going to stab into your enemies, but also cut them up a bit when you when you pull it out, allowing you to add some bleed damage. And then also a bladed upgrade, which has that bleed damage and a flat damage upgrade on top of that, that has 2 big blades welded onto either side and some bolts and mounting points that make it a little bit more secure. This one I totally freeballed the design of, and I thought it came out really, really cool, and I'm pretty proud of it. Now, there's also some extra elemental type upgrades for each of these blades. We have the poisoned upgrade for the serrated one, so you're going to be adding bleed and poison for some extra damage over time. And then there's an electrified upgrade to the other blade, which is going to give you a lot of damage versus the damage over time. So it really depends on how you want to upgrade this thing, or if you're fine with just the standard old versions here. Either way, there's some pretty cool options for this little screwdriver knife that I think are pretty fun for a raidery makeshift melee weapon. Even if you don't use it yourself, I think it's pretty cool to see this thing on enemies. And finally, that leaves us with the heavy wrench, the big two-handed melee option. So we have something for each category. We've got one-handed blunt, a one-handed knife, and a big two-handed weapon as well. This thing is going to be a pretty heavy hitter and make use of an interesting animation set. I actually forgot to talk about that with each of these weapons. The claw hammer uses the typical one-handed like tire iron swing, and the screwdriver is going to use the knife stabby animations as it should. This guy is actually rigged up to baseball bat animations instead of the normal two-handed melee animations because we thought it made the most sense given some of the attachments and the way that it is held in your hand. I actually think it looks quite cool, and it makes a lot of the attachments show up in a way that looks really nice in first person and honestly in third person as well. Anyways, this thing's got a base damage of around 37, probably more like 35. Swing speed of slow, weight of 5 pounds, and a value of 30 caps. And it has that nice Schlocket branding from the Fallout franchise. And this thing's massive. It's a big old wrench. But it's got some interesting and fun attachments like the other guys to make it a bit more than a wrench if you'd like it to be. So when it comes to the wrench, we've got a standard head, which is your typical old wrench. We also have a heavy head, which clamps in a couple of those gears from before and bolts them in between, and then is also tightened down, which is pretty fun. And that makes for extra limb damage and superior base damage. We have a hooked head, which has the clamp actually tightened up a bit compared to the standard version. And that holds in a couple of hooks that give you a chance to disarm your opponent and gives you better damage on top of that. The puncturing head has 2 custom rail spikes that are bolted into the sides of this thing, and they allow for some armor-piercing damage as well as increased base damage. The bladed head, I really love this one because it transforms your wrench into a brand new solid metal axe. It removes one of the moving pieces of the clamp there so that you can fit on a whole axe head that is bolted on in a bunch of ways to make it nice and secure. It's got the hammer forged sort of look, and I think it came out really, really cool. It's honestly probably one of my favorite attachments on this thing, and it also gives you bleed damage and exceptional base damage. There is also a serrated bladed head, which is a saw blade that is wrapped around this thing with wire all over the place, clamped onto a bolt in the middle there. It's a very goofy, scrappy looking version, but I thought this was really cool for raiders, sort of reminiscent of that saw blade weapon in the Borderlands franchise, but a little less movie and a little more raidery. We also have an electrified head that has some arcing between it. That looks very static here in the menu, but that is once again flickering and moving once you actually take it out in game in first person. And then we have a heated head as well, which is going to heat up the end here, and that also looks really, really cool. The way that it sort of has a gradient down because you don't want to burn your hands. I'd recommend wearing gloves with this all-metal design. Same here, to be honest. Now, that does leave us with one more thing to talk about, which is the unique. So if you don't want any spoilers there, you might as well turn away. But if you do want to know what our unique is this time around, go ahead and stay tuned. The unique is actually a unique version of the claw hammer known as the nail driver. I clicked the wrong one. And it is going to be a rocket-powered version of the hammer, allowing for some pretty heavy hits that give you a chance to stagger the enemy whenever you clonk them, which allows you to get even more hits in because this thing is swinging with a lot of force behind it. It's a pretty cool design. Pig came up with this one with some nif-bashed elements, and it looks really, really neat. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think it's a very fun way to do a one-handed, unique melee weapon. So, yeah. If you'd like to get your hands on this unique, it is actually found, very fittingly, in a toolbox over at the location known as Mass, Gravel, and Sand. So that'll give you a pretty cool hardware-based melee weapon, which is very fun, especially if you're a settlement builder. I think this is a very fitting melee weapon to keep as a backup for when you run out of ammo. I think it's pretty neat. Now, with this mod, you have the ability to have a bunch of tool-based weapons in your loadout, meaning you can equip this with maybe the railway rifle that shoots rail spikes at enemies, and then you have some tools as your backup melee. There's some pretty fun and interesting character builds you can do now that are very interesting thematically. As usual, I hope you guys enjoy all of the content in this mod. If you'd like to check it out for yourself, it'll be linked down in the description below as always. And while you're down there, if you consider dropping the video a like if you liked it. If you didn't, then don't worry about it. But if you did, it's a great way to show support for this kind of content and get it to more people who might want to see stuff like this. Additionally, if you'd like to support the mod itself, you can do that either by checking it out on Nexus and giving it an endorsement. That is just essentially the like from YouTube, but over on the Nexus mod scene. Or if you want a more direct way to support my work, you can check me out on Patreon, but that is, as always, completely optional, not something you should feel like you need to do, just there for those crazy enough who want to. With that, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace!